The glass shattered against the wall inches from my head. I didn't flinch. That's what surprised me most, my own stillness in the storm of her rage. Michelle's face was contorted, her perfectly applied makeup unable to mask the ugliness beneath. "Say something, you pathetic excuse for a man," she screamed, her voice echoing through our modern open-concept home, the home I had paid for but somehow never felt was mine. I looked at her, really looked at her, maybe for the first time in years. The designer dress that cost more than I made in a week. The diamond tennis bracelet I'd bought her for our anniversary. The cold, calculating eyes that had never once looked at me with genuine love. "I know everything, Michelle," I said quietly, my voice steadier than it had ever been in her presence. Her laughter was sharp, condescending. "You don't know anything, Chris. You never have." She tossed her dark hair over her shoulder and reached for her purse. "I'm going out. Don't wait up." I didn't tell her that I would never wait up for her again. I didn't tell her that the quiet accountant she had married and systematically destroyed had finally done the math, and the numbers didn't add up in her favor. I simply watched her leave, the scent of her expensive perfume lingering in the air like a toxic cloud. And I smiled. "My name is Christopher Bennett. I'm a senior financial analyst at Meridian Partners, a mid-sized accounting firm in Boston. I make good money, great money actually, though you wouldn't know it from the way Michelle talks about my career. Number cruncher," she calls me with that dismissive wave of her hand. "Glorified calculator." I met Michelle at a charity gala 7 years ago. I was there representing our firm, which had donated a substantial sum. She was there because people like Michelle are always at events where they can be seen by the right people. She was stunning that night. Black dress, red lips, eyes that seemed to drink me in when she introduced herself. "Financial analyst?" she'd asked, her interest piqued rather than diminished. "So you're good with money." That should have been my first red flag. But I was lonely, overworked, and she was intoxicating. We were married within 8 months. For a while, I believed I was the luckiest man alive. That feeling didn't last. The shift was gradual. A comment here, a criticism there. The way she'd roll her eyes when I spoke at dinner parties. The not-so-subtle comparisons to her friends' husbands, all apparently more successful, more interesting, more everything than me. "Can you try not to be so beige tonight?" she'd ask before we'd go out. "These are important people." I didn't realize I was beige. I thought I was just me. Analytical, yes, but also thoughtful, loyal. The man who remembered every anniversary, who planned surprise weekends away, who listened to her dreams and tried to make them come true. Somewhere along the way, that man disappeared. Or rather, he was erased, systematically, by Michelle's constant disapproval. I lost friends because Michelle found them boring or beneath us. I stopped calling my parents as often because Michelle would sigh dramatically during our conversations. I worked longer hours because at least at work, I felt competent, valued. And then came the financial control. It started innocently enough. "Let me handle the bills, honey. You're so busy with work. We should combine our accounts. It's simpler. I'm investing in this opportunity with my friend Jen. It's a sure thing. Being an accountant, I should have seen the warning signs. But love, or what I thought was love, makes you blind to the obvious. By the time I started noticing discrepancies, asking questions, Michelle had perfected her arsenal of deflections. "Don't you trust me? God, you're so controlling with money. This is why I can never talk to you about anything important." And I would back down, retreat, apologize for doubting her. The affairs were the last piece of the puzzle to fall into place. I suspected, of course. The late nights. The girls' trips that required new lingerie. The way she'd angle her phone away from me when texting. The strange charges on credit card statements from hotels across town. But suspecting and knowing are different beasts entirely. The final breaking point came at the Johnsons' dinner party 3 months ago. 8 couples, all from Michelle's social circle. I was there because she needed a husband to display, like an accessory that completed her outfit but wasn't quite the right color. I was discussing a new tax strategy with Tom, actually enjoying myself for once, when I overheard Michelle's voice, slightly too loud from the wine she'd been drinking. "Chris? Please. If I wanted someone who actually makes money, I'd have married someone with a real job." The table went quiet. Faces turned to me with that awful mix of pity and second-hand embarrassment. Michelle didn't even have the decency to look ashamed. She just raised an eyebrow, challenging me to respond. I didn't. I smiled politely, excused myself to the bathroom, and stood staring at my reflection for a full 5 minutes. Who was this man? This shell? This doormat? This nothing. That night, after Michelle had stumbled into bed without so much as looking at me, I made my decision. Cold, calculated, final. I would destroy her just as methodically as she had destroyed me. The first step was information. Michelle had been careless, assuming I was too weak, too stupid, or too broken to fight back. That was her first mistake. I contacted Thomas Reeves, a former client who ran a private investigation firm. Tom owed me a favor. I'd helped him restructure his business financials when he was on the brink of bankruptcy, saving him thousands in potential tax penalties. "I need someone discreet," I told him over coffee at a place far from my usual haunts. "Someone who can get me everything without leaving a trace." Tom didn't ask questions. He simply nodded and assigned his best investigator, Sarah Chen. "She's ex-FBI," Tom told me. "Specializes in financial crimes. If there's anything to find, Sarah will find it." For 6 weeks, Sarah shadowed Michelle, documented her movements, and dug into our finances with a thoroughness that would have impressed even the most zealous IRS auditor. Meanwhile, I played my part, the oblivious husband, the reliable punching bag. I endured Michelle's taunts, her casual cruelty, her absences. I even apologized when she berated me for questioning a $5,000 withdrawal from our joint account. "It's for your birthday present, you idiot," she'd snapped. "Way to ruin the surprise." My birthday wasn't for another 6 months, and I knew the money had actually gone to a weekend at the Four Seasons with her latest lover. A fact Sarah confirmed with photographs that turned my stomach but steeled my resolve. The evidence Sarah compiled was damning beyond even my darkest suspicions. Michelle hadn't just been unfaithful, she'd been systematically stealing from me for years. The investments she claimed to be making? Non-existent. The money had gone into a private account under her maiden name. The loans to friends in need. Never made. The funds had paid for weekend trips with lovers, designer clothes, and a cascade of luxury items hidden in a storage unit across town. And then there were the affairs. Not 1 or 2 indiscretions born of marital dissatisfaction, but a calculated pattern of infidelity that spanned most of our marriage. Men from her social circle, a personal trainer, even the husband of her supposed best friend. "There's more," Sarah told me during our final meeting, sliding a folder across the table. "She's been talking about you to everyone who'll listen, spreading rumors, undermining your reputation, painting herself as the victim of an emotionally distant, financially controlling husband." I flipped through the documented conversations, the social media messages, the transcripts of recorded conversations. Michelle had been waging a campaign against me for years, ensuring that if I ever did discover her betrayals, no one would believe me. "She's good," Sarah admitted. "One of the most methodical cases I've worked. But she made a critical error." "What's that?" I asked, still processing the extent of Michelle's duplicity. Sarah smiled grimly. "She underestimated her opponent. You're not who she thinks you are, Mr. Bennett." "No, I wasn't. Not anymore." With the evidence secured, I began phase 2, preparation. I met with Diana Zhang, a ruthlessly efficient divorce attorney known for handling high-profile cases with surgical precision. I laid out everything Sarah had discovered, watching Diana's expression shift from professional interest to gleeful anticipation. She searched for the right word. Comprehensive. Most clients come to me with suspicions. You've brought me a case. What are my options? I asked. Diana outlined several approaches, but one stood out as particularly fitting. Given the extent of financial fraud and the deliberate character assassination, we could pursue criminal charges alongside the divorce proceedings, she explained. But there's another way, one that might be more satisfying. Her plan was elegant in its simplicity. We would gather all the affected parties, the friends whose husbands Michelle had seduced, the family members she'd manipulated, the business associates she'd lied to, and present the evidence simultaneously. A coordinated strike that would leave Michelle with nowhere to hide, no one to turn to. Social death before legal execution, Diana said with a cold smile. Sometimes that's the more effective punishment. I agreed. Michelle valued her social standing above all else. To lose that would be devastating in a way that even financial penalties couldn't match. While Diana prepared the legal groundwork, I quietly secured my assets. New accounts Michelle couldn't access. A temporary apartment leased under a corporation name. Important documents moved to a safe deposit box. I changed the beneficiaries on my life insurance policies. Updated my will. Documented every valuable item in our home with photographs and appraisals. Throughout it all, I maintained the facade. Went to work. Came home. Absorbed Michelle's casual cruelty with a new sense of detachment, knowing each barb was one of the last she would ever throw my way. You wouldn't understand. You're just too simple to grasp what I need, she told me one night after returning home at 2 a.m., reeking of another man's cologne. I nodded, as if accepting this assessment. You're probably right, I said mildly. She didn't notice the change in me, the stillness that had replaced my usual anxiety in her presence. She was too wrapped up in her own narrative, too confident in her control, to see that the scales had finally fallen from my eyes. That was her second mistake. The execution of my plan required perfect timing. Michelle thrived on being the center of attention, on orchestrating events where she could shine. Her annual charity fundraiser for the Children's Hospital, an event she chaired primarily for the social cachet rather than any genuine concern for sick children, provided the ideal backdrop. The event was scheduled for a Saturday night at the Ritz-Carlton. 200 of Boston's elite would be there, including most of the people Michelle had manipulated, betrayed, or lied to over the years. The night before, I prepared a quiet dinner at home. Michelle was surprised. I rarely cooked anymore, having been criticized one too many times for my pedestrian culinary skills, but pleased at the opportunity to hold court at our dining table. The Prestons confirmed for tomorrow, she said, sipping the expensive Bordeaux I'd opened. Helen was being difficult as usual, but I convinced her that her absence would be noted. She smirked. I didn't mention that her husband has already RSVP'd separately. I nodded, serving the roast chicken I'd prepared. That was smart of you. The seating arrangement is crucial. I've put the Andersons at table 4, away from the Whitneys. There's some tension there since Mark Whitney's company outbid Anderson Global on that downtown development. I listened as Michelle continued detailing her social chess game, marveling at the energy she put into these manipulations. All that intelligence, all that strategic thinking, wasted on petty power plays. You seem quiet tonight, she finally noticed, eyeing me with a hint of suspicion. Just tired, I replied. Big project at work. She immediately lost interest. My work was never worth discussing unless it involved a promotion or bonus that could benefit her. Well, don't be tired tomorrow night. The Blanchards are bringing that hedge fund manager I told you about. Try to say something intelligent when I introduce you. I smiled. I'll do my best. After dinner, As Michelle disappeared upstairs to make more planning calls for the event, I sat alone in our living room, a strange calm settling over me. Tomorrow, everything would change. The thought should have terrified me, but instead, I felt only relief. 7 years of my life had been stolen by this woman. Tomorrow, I would begin reclaiming what was left. The morning of the fundraiser, Michelle was in rare form, alternating between barking orders at the event staff via phone and criticizing my every move. "Are you really wearing that tie? It makes you look sallow. Did you confirm the car service? You know I can't trust you with details. Try not to embarrass me tonight. The hospital board president will be there." I absorbed it all with a new sense of detachment, like watching a movie I'd seen too many times to be affected by. At 4 p.m., Michelle left for the hotel to oversee the final preparations, leaving me with strict instructions to arrive by 7 p.m. sharp. "Not earlier. I don't need you underfoot. And certainly not later. I won't have you making us look bad by missing the cocktail hour." As soon as she left, I called Diana, confirming that everything was in place. Then I dressed carefully in my best suit, not the one Michelle had selected, but a perfectly tailored navy Tom Ford that I'd purchased secretly, one that actually fit my broader-than-she-acknowledged shoulders. I arrived at the Ritz at exactly 7 p.m. The ballroom was transformed into Michelle's vision of sophistication: white orchids, crystal chandeliers, subtle lighting that flattered even the most surgically enhanced faces in the room. Michelle was holding court near the main entrance, resplendent in a red gown that had cost more than my first car. She stiffened slightly when she saw me, surprised perhaps by my appearance, or maybe just preparing herself for the inevitable disappointment I represented. "There you are," she said, not quite managing to keep the disdain from her voice. She turned to the couple she was speaking with. "My husband, Chris. He's in finance." The way she said it made it sound like I collected garbage for a living. I smiled, shook hands, made appropriate small talk. For the next hour, I played my role perfectly, the bland, forgettable husband who orbited Michelle's star. I watched her work the room, moving from group to group, leaving little barbs and manipulations in her wake like a snail's trail of slime. At precisely 8:15 p.m., Diana arrived with her team. Right on schedule, the event photographer, actually one of Sarah's associates, began gathering people for special group photos near the stage. Michelle, always eager to be documented at the center of important people, hurried over, positioning herself prominently among hospital board members and major donors. That's when the screens around the ballroom, installed for a planned presentation about the hospital's achievements, flickered to life. But instead of smiling children and dedicated doctors, they displayed a simple message: the truth about Michelle Bennett, a public service announcement. Michelle's face, frozen in a camera-ready smile, slowly transformed as the screens began cycling through evidence of her deceptions. Text messages to lovers, bank statements showing stolen funds, social media messages where she mocked the very people now standing beside her. A horrified murmur swept through the crowd. Michelle's head whipped around, searching for me, her eyes wide with panic and fury. I stood calmly at the back of the room, meeting her gaze steadily. For the first time in our marriage, I didn't look away. Diana moved smoothly through the crowd, distributing sealed envelopes to specific guests, those most personally affected by Michelle's machinations. Helen Preston opening hers to find photos of her husband in Michelle's embrace. The hospital board president discovering evidence of Michelle's embezzlement from previous charity events. Michelle's own parents receiving documented proof of how she had been manipulating them against me for years. The room erupted into chaos, angry voices, accusations. Michelle, desperately trying to regain control, her voice rising to a shriek above the din. "This is all lies! He's making this up! He's trying to control me!" But no one was listening anymore. Her carefully constructed social web was disintegrating thread by thread, leaving her exposed and alone in the center. I walked toward her, the crowd parting before me like the Red Sea. When I reached her, she was already crumbling, mascara tracking down her perfect cheeks. "You can't do this to me," she hissed, grabbing my arm with claw-like fingers. "I'll destroy you." I gently removed her hand. "You already tried that, Michelle. For 7 years." My voice was soft, meant only for her ears. "But you made a critical error in your calculations." "What's that?" she spat, still defiant even as her world collapsed around her. "You chose an accountant as your victim, and we always make sure the numbers add up in the end." With that, I walked away, leaving her surrounded by the wreckage of her deceptions. As I reached the ballroom doors, I heard Diana's voice, clear and professional, informing Michelle that she would be served with divorce papers in the morning, along with a restraining order preventing her from accessing any of our joint assets or returning to our home. Outside in the cool night air, I took my first deep breath in years. Behind me, I could hear Michelle's wails of rage and desperation. The sound didn't bring me joy exactly, but something more profound: vindication, justice, freedom. The aftermath unfolded exactly as Diana had predicted. Michelle, socially and financially ruined, attempted to salvage what she could. She called friends who no longer answered, pleaded with family who had seen her true nature at last, threatened legal action she couldn't afford to pursue. The divorce proceedings were swift and decisive, with irrefutable evidence of financial fraud, infidelity, and malicious defamation. The judge had little patience for Michelle's tearful claims of victimhood. She left the courtroom with nothing but the clothes she wore and the crushing weight of her exposed lies. I kept the house but sold it immediately. Too many ghosts lingered in those perfectly designed rooms. I took a sabbatical from work, traveling to places Michelle had always dismissed as boring or common. I hiked the Appalachian Trail, volunteered at a literacy program in Appalachia, reconnected with the friends and family I had pushed away during my marriage. Slowly, I reclaimed pieces of myself that had been buried beneath Michelle's constant criticism. I remembered that I loved jazz before Michelle had deemed it pretentious, that I enjoyed cooking before Michelle had mocked my efforts, that I had opinions and preferences and worth, independent of her assessment. 6 months after the charity event that ended my marriage, I received a text from Helen Preston, whose husband had been one of Michelle's more frequent companions. "Thought you might want to know. Michelle's working as a receptionist at a dental office in New Hampshire. Apparently no one in Boston would hire her. Karma's quite the mathematician herself." I didn't respond. Michelle no longer occupied any space in my thoughts or heart. Her downfall brought me no pleasure beyond the initial satisfaction of justice served. Instead, I focused on rebuilding. A new condo overlooking the Charles River, a partnership offer at the firm, a slow, cautious re-entry into dating, with a therapist's guidance to help me recognize red flags I had once been too naive to see. 1 year to the day after Michelle's public unmasking, I attended another charity event at the Ritz-Carlton, this one for literacy programs in underserved communities. As I sipped champagne and made a generous donation, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in a mirrored wall. The man looking back at me stood straight and tall, no longer hunched under the weight of constant criticism. His eyes were clear, his smile genuine. He looked like a man who knew his own worth. That night, as I walked home along the river, I realized something profound. Michelle hadn't broken me. She had tried, systematically, cruelly, relentlessly. But some essential core had remained intact, waiting for the moment I would finally stand up and reclaim it. The cool night air filled my lungs. Stars reflected on the dark water, and for the first time in longer than I could remember, I felt completely, unquestionably whole. Not because I had destroyed Michelle, but because in the process, I had found myself again. And that, more than any revenge, was the sweetest victory of all. And so, we've reached the end of today's story. Was it what you expected, or did it take a twist you didn't see coming? I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Share them in the comments below, and let's get a conversation going. If this story kept you hooked, make sure to hit that like button. And if you're new here or just haven't subscribed yet, now's the perfect time to join our community. I bring you fresh, captivating stories every day, so click that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.